Welcome to LOA Today. I'm Walt Thiessen here with life coach Cindy Chavez, trying to turn off the acoustic in the background. Today is Wednesday, September the 16th, 2020. It's 4 p.m. New York time, and wherever you are in the world, thanks for joining us for another episode of LOA Today, your daily dose of happy. And Cindy, before the show, I was sharing with you and the other co-hosts, we have some exciting stuff that's kind of brewing up here.
Right.
That started here on the show, I think about 3 or 4 weeks ago, during the Friday podcast with Rita and Linda, where Rita, in the midst of answering questions from listeners, stopped and said, I have a message for you from Spirit. And I said, oh, okay. What's all this? I can hardly wait, right? And she said, well, they're saying that you should really be owning your own radio station. And I'm thinking, well, sure, that'd be great to have that kind of reach and so forth. I'm not sure I really want to run a radio station, but nevertheless, that would be cool. And it just kind of turned into a thing on its own. So, I mean, I talked about it with you. I actually talked with Dan on the show. It came up again with Rita and Linda. I talked about it with Louie. I mean, it was just kind of moving along. And the idea kept expanding. It kind of morphed into, well, wouldn't it be great to do a TV show? All of which has culminated in a conversation that I had by phone today with the director of the Hartford, Connecticut Public Access Television Channel, saying he wants to see an example of our show with the possibility of putting us on the air in the greater Hartford area. And I'm thinking, are you kidding me? I mean,
that's how it happens.
This LOA stuff is just freaking awesome. That's all I can say.
You know what comes to mind when you talk about this for me is that something that we've mentioned over and over, and that is that I see it this way anyway, that's how the universe always works through other people.
Yes.
And so we had that story that was part of the book we put together about Anne Marie's wanting a piano for the center that they had.
Right.
A nice piano.
Yes.
And
the Steinway.
And just kept talking it up to everyone.
Yep.
And it sounded like the craziest idea. Like if you know how much a new Steinway piano costs,
really
just to say, oh, I'd like to, but someone actually gave them one. And the thing I always take away from that story is that she wasn't just sitting at home, like hoping and wishing in her mind or even visualizing and imagining in her mind, but she was talking to people and mentioning it to everyone, like saying, this is what I'd love to have. This is what we need. And that's the one thing that a lot of times people don't do. Mm-hmm. I mean, I'm talking about conscious creators and people in manifesting circles, is they'll do a lot of visualizing and vision boards and meditating and imagining, but they don't go that extra step and just start saying to people, this is what I'm looking for, this is what I want, and really talking it up to everyone. But that's how it usually comes about, is that someone else gives it to you or opens a door to another opportunity or talks you up to someone else. And how does that happen if you're not out talking about it? And I had this conversation with someone today that the way I met my husband, I had been single for a while. I was really feeling healed up from the brokenheartedness of a painful divorce, and I was ready to have a relationship. And I was at home, and I decided to look at an astrology app that I used from the astrologer Susan Miller, who's been around for about 30 years. I think she's fantastic. And I opened it up, and basically the little tiny message for that day said, I don't know where you're going to find your soulmate, but I do know it's not going to be sitting in your living room eating dinner by yourself. And I remember thinking, okay. And so I went to dinner at my son's restaurant, and my son said, hey, my brother is bartending over at this new really cool place. You should go have a drink and say hello to him. And so I decided to do that. And there was a private party going on for the green industry there. And there were all these people on bicycles coming in because the deal was, not to drive cars, but to ride bikes and to recycle. And there were all these booths set up for recycling stuff. And in comes this cyclist. And it was my future husband.
Wow.
And that never would have happened if I would have just sat at home visualizing, right?
Right.
It's like, and I did plenty of that, but it's like sometimes you have to reach out. And so you, and this idea that Rita, gave you from the ethers about you should own a radio station, you started visualizing, but I think you told me, well, every time I went to like visualize it, I saw us doing TV.
Yeah.
And, instead of keeping that to yourself, you told me and our whole audience, and you told the other co-hosts, and you started talking about it. That's how things happen.
In fact, that's ultimately what led me to even remember that public access TV exists. It's often called community TV, depending on where you are in the United States. I think roughly 4/5 of the country have various forms of public access television. And I've known about it for decades, but I forgot about it.
Right.
I mean, I literally hadn't thought about it in years. And so it just wasn't even in the picture. But then in one of the conversations I had with one of you, I don't even remember which one it was, it kind of came out like, oh, yeah, there's public access. I hadn't thought about that. So I did some research. I found the local public access, and then I kept getting blocked. I would send a message go through, didn't hear anything for a week. I tried the phone number, it was a fax number. I tried the fax number, it was a fax number. I tried sending a fax, that didn't work. I mean, it was just, I was being blocked. And then I did some of the things we've talked about to get the vibration up, and that's what led to a phone call. They called me. I'm thinking, there's another example. You have to shift your vibration into alignment with the thing that you really want in order to have it happen.
And also keep going. Don't give up, right?
And don't give up. Yeah.
You were persistent. Yeah.
And it's not, I didn't do a whole lot. It's not like I went out and did a whole bunch of work. I did what they call inspired action. Oh yeah, I think I should just do something. Just try it. And did 3 minutes of trying to fill out a form, and it didn't go anywhere. And then later on, a minute to send an email. I wasn't doing a lot of work. I was just trying a few things and seeing what happened.
Yeah.
And that's what works. That's what works the best. By the way, I also want to mention, I know we have a few listeners who are actually living in the city of Hartford. I need a sponsor because it has to be sponsored by somebody who lives in the city in order to be on the Hartford Public Access Channel. So if you're a listener who lives in the Hartford, Connecticut, within the boundaries of the city of Hartford, please get in touch with me through the LOA Today app or just my email address, walt@loatoday.net, because I need to get a sponsor so that we can do this. Also, there are other towns in the area, Farmington, Simsbury, I believe Canton, Avon, New Britain. I mean, there are a number in the area that also have their own public access. So anyone, I mean, I live in Simsbury, so I can do that one. But anyone else who lives in the area who's a listener and who'd be willing to be a sponsor, get in touch, because we're going to need to have sponsors in order to get into these. But this is cool. This is so cool.
I love it. I love it. I just love it when I hear people ask for what they need.
Yeah. And it comes. It's so great.
Yeah.
Which is actually appropriate because we're finishing up part 6 of this book that you found by Neville Goddard that we hadn't previously discovered, called At Your Command. And I say it's appropriate because Neville is pretty much the champion of how to visualize and manifest stuff. I mean, he has this very distinct formula that we explored quite a bit as we explored his many books.
We have.
So it's kind of appropriate. We're finishing up the Neville cycle just as this is all beginning to happen.
And, how things often dovetail, especially with our Neville show, and probably all the shows actually. Last week when we finished and where we're starting this part this week, Neville's been talking about the Prodigal Son.
Mm-hmm.
And if you know the story of the Prodigal Son, I don't know if he's going to talk about it, so I thought, well, we would just... I don't know if you could hear that, but
somebody's celebrating the fact.
Race right outside my office.
They're celebrating the TV show. That's what it is.
Well, the Prodigal Son, in a nutshell, a man has 2 sons. One of them asks if he could have his inheritance early. He goes out and squanders it. That's the word prodigal. He's wasteful. He squanders it and finds himself then destitute without money and says, "Oh no, I'm going to have to go home and beg, for my father to take care of me because I don't have any of my inheritance left." And he goes home and he says to his father, "Look, I'll do whatever you need me to do. I see, you have servants here that they are well fed and taken care of, and I'll be a servant. I'll do whatever I need to do." And the father throws him a big party because he's so happy that he's come home.
Mm-hmm.
And the other brother says, well, I've been here with you the whole time. You never threw a party for me.
Mm.
And the other brother refuses to come to the party. And the father says, but you've been here the whole time. You've always had access to everything I have.
Mm-hmm.
And I'm giving a party for your brother because he's come back. I'm happy that he's home, right? And I thought about this story after we finished last week, the prodigal son. Last week at the very end of the chapter, when we talked about the prodigal son, Neville says, follow the example of the prodigal son. Realize that you yourself brought about this condition of waste and lack, and make the decision within yourself to rise to a higher level where the fatted calf, the ring, and the robe await your claim. Because, of course, the prodigal son's father brought out the fatted calf, gave him a ring, put on a robe, and said, let's celebrate, let's party, you're back.
Mm-hmm.
And I thought about this idea that we were just talking about asking for what we need. Sometimes we're embarrassed to ask for what we need.
Mm. Yes.
Right? Like even the example I often give to clients is like, what's the best thing to do if you need a job? Tell everyone you know. But sometimes people are embarrassed to say, I'm looking for work. Why? Because maybe they got fired or they quit their job and it turned out to be a bad move or whatever. And they're embarrassed that they don't have a job. It's like this. It's like Neville is saying, look, don't be embarrassed. Just own it. Right? Just own whatever happened in the past and move on into that place, that higher level, he says, where you can have the things you desire.
So true.
So Neville says, there's no condemnation of the prodigal when he had the courage to claim this inheritance as his own. Others will condemn us only as long as we continue in that for which we condemn ourselves. Right? Isn't that the truth? That
it is.
Often the condemnation that is either actually coming at us or that we perceive is coming at us is just a reflection of the condemnation that we have for ourselves in our own heart.
Mm-hmm. We are our own worst enemies at times. We are the most critical people of ourselves. It's crazy how much.
Yeah. So he says, he quotes, happy is the man that condemneth himself not in that which he alloweth. For to life nothing is condemned. All is expressed. Neville says, life does not care whether you call yourself rich or poor, strong or weak. It will eternally reward you with that which you claim as true of yourself. The measurements of right and wrong belong to man alone. To life, there is nothing right or wrong. As Paul stated in his letter to the Romans, I know and am persuaded by the Lord Jesus that there is nothing unclean of itself, but to him that esteemeth anything to be unclean, to him it is unclean. Stop asking yourself whether you are worthy or unworthy to receive that which you desire. You, as man, did not create the desire. Your desires are ever fashioned within you because of what you now claim yourself to be. When a man is hungry, without thinking, he automatically desires food. When imprisoned, he automatically desires freedom, and so forth. Your desires contain within themselves the plan of self-expression. So leave all judgments out of the picture and rise in consciousness to the level of your desire and make yourself one with it by claiming it to be so now. For my grace is sufficient for thee. My strength is made perfect in weakness. Have faith in this unseen claim until the conviction is born within you that it is so. Your confidence in this claim will pay great rewards. Just a little while, and he, the thing desired, will come. But without faith it is impossible to realize anything. Through faith the worlds were framed, because faith is the substance of the thing hoped for, the evidence of the thing not yet seen. I really always like to talk about that verse and the idea of faith as a kind of knowing. And it's different from hope. I always say that, like, when someone feels hopeless, that's the worst thing. When a client comes to me and feels hopeless, like their hope is gone, that's the first thing I want to do is restore their hope. And it's the best thing ever to hear someone say at the end of a phone call, oh my gosh, I have hope again. I feel like my hope is restored. I feel like things are possible for me again. That's wonderful. And at that point, that is when you start building faith, because hope never creates anything, right? People say, so, ask them a question and say, well, I hope so. There's not a lot of power in that, is there?
No, not really. I mean, it's the very origin of the thought, and that's important, but it's only the origin. It hasn't built up its power yet, which comes from the attention that we were talking about earlier.
So if you ask somebody the same question, if you ask one person, so how is it looking, that new job opportunity, how is it looking? Do you think you'll get it? And they say, I hope so. Is so much different of energy than if they say, absolutely. I feel so good about it. I know that I'm going to get it, and that's not to say we shouldn't be honest, but when your faith is really strong, and I don't mean your faith in some outward thing, like we're talking Neville here.
Yes.
This is your faith in your own ability, your faith in your imagination, your faith in your power, your faith is in your creative, generative ability. When that faith is really strong, that's when you say, oh, I know it. And then after the fact, what do you say? Oh, I knew it. I knew it. Yes. I knew it was going to happen like this. And that I hope so is kind of wishy-washy. And so I think it's important that we recognize when Neville's talking about faith and he's quoting verses from the Christian Bible, right? Faith is the substance of the thing hoped for.
Right.
It's the substance of the thing that you hope for. It's the evidence of that thing, even though you can't see it. But so many times when people are, saying, well, this is from the Christian Bible, they're thinking about faith in some power that's outside of themselves. And that's not what Neville's talking about.
Correct. Right. He's talking very specifically about the faith in one's own conscious choice, in one's own conscious selections, and in the ability of our selections to actually lead to what we want to have happen. That's a hard one that all of us have to deal with at the very beginning of learning what this stuff is. The first thing we're faced with when we hear about the law of attraction is that internal voice that says, yeah, well, that won't work for me. Because we just haven't built up any real confidence in ourselves in that way. But over time, as we do the work, as we build ourselves, I do mirror work, that's one of my favorite things to do, build up our confidence in our own conscious ability to create, then it becomes easier to zip past hope into that realm of knowing.
Right. And once you have some wins under your belt, right?
Yeah.
I mean, I think about, when my boys were young, I used to help coach their baseball team. And, confidence can make all the difference. And it's like when you hear about a team having a winning streak, I think some of that streakness happens because you're building momentum and you're so confident. And it's like everything's going well. And so, I remember one time it was back, I guess in the early 90s, the pro baseball teams, like all the pro baseball players started like bleaching their hair blonde, like
oh yeah,
blonde.
I remember that.
It was like a thing. Yeah. Remember that?
Right.
Well, our little team, they were like fifth graders, fourth graders, and we took them to a game. All the parents arriving with the kids in their cars, and we were playing a team we've never played. And here comes a bus. This team showed up in a bus, right? And it was a beautiful bus. They all got off the bus and they all had their hair bleached blonde. They had cool uniforms on, and our little guys were just like, oh, you could just see the confidence just drifting away.
Right. Yeah.
And so, I think that part of it is that momentum. Once you get some wins under your belt, you do some mirror work, you notice that you're feeling better, and then a couple things that you are desiring and really picturing start to happen, and that builds momentum over time. So I like what Neville says next, is he says, don't be anxious or concerned as to results. They will follow just as surely as day follows night. Look upon your desires, all of them. Now listen to this. Look upon your desires, all of them, as the spoken words of God. And every word or desire a promise.
Is it time for the Neville decoder ring?
Well, I'm just thinking two phrases here. If just to use these phrases kind of floating out in no context, if you heard words of God or spoken words of God or a promise of God, those things, even if you were not a religious person, even if you didn't adhere to any faith, they still are very weighty, right?
Oh, yeah.
The word of God, the promise of God, right? Those things are like, oh, okay. That's
you almost need to have like an echo chamber saying, the word of God.
Right. We need one of those famous deep voices. So for Neville to say, to look upon your desires that way, and he says all of them. The reason most of us fail to realize our desires is because we are constantly conditioning them. Do not condition your desire. Just accept it as it comes to you. Give thanks for it to the point that you are grateful for having already received it, and then go about your way in peace.
By the way, I want to insert something. I'd mentioned the Neville decoder ring and I didn't follow up on it. And the reason I was mentioning that is to remind everybody that when Neville uses the word God, he means your consciousness. So just clarifying what that point is.
Right. And we, it's one of the things when we were doing the early Neville books a year or two ago, we were always stopping every half of a sentence. We would stop and have to explain, because Neville is not looking at these words the way most of us would think they would be looked at in church,
right,
or in a Bible study, or in whatever Sunday school, whatever other experience you might have with the Christian Bible, the Jewish Bible, even some other holy texts, sacred texts that Neville uses. He's always looking at them in a very different way. And there are a few things that are key, and that's one of them. Yep. That when he talks about God, when he talks about Lord, when he talks about the Father, when he talks about Jesus, he is always meaning that as a metaphor for your imagination, for your consciousness, for your own creative ability. And so when he's talking about conditioning their desires, and that we shouldn't do that. Such acceptance of your desire is like dropping seed, fertile seed, into prepared soil. For when you can drop the thing desired in consciousness, confident that it shall appear, you have done all that is expected to you. But to be worried or concerned about how your desire maturing is to hold these fertile seeds in a mental grasp, and therefore never to have dropped them in the soil of confidence. That's a really great paragraph.
Well, I want to add on to that is exactly what I did not do with the TV idea. I did not for 1 second even imagine that I could determine how it was going to happen. I didn't have the faintest clue how it could happen. And I let it be that way, and I was perfectly okay with that. So I didn't give any attention to, oh my God, how is this going to work? I gave no attention to that at all.
I love the visual that he has here. He says a mental, you're holding those fertile seeds. They're fertile. They are ready to grow. This thing is ready to happen if you will just drop it into the soil of consciousness. Right. But when you start figuring out how, he says you're holding them in a mental grasp. So I have this picture of you're holding these seeds in your hand, and the soil is right there, but you haven't dropped them in.
Yeah.
They are not going to grow unless you drop them in. It doesn't matter how clearly you see the vision.
That's a great metaphor. Yeah. That's
a great way of describing it. If you haven't dropped them in.
Yeah.
And so he says the reason men condition their desires is because they constantly judge after the appearance of being and see the things as real, forgetting that the only reality is the consciousness back of them. To see things as real is to deny that all things are possible to God. Now, once again, when Neville says God, he's talking about our imagination.
Right.
The man who is imprisoned and sees his four walls as real is automatically denying the urge or promise of God within him of freedom. A question often asked when this statement is made is, if one's desire is a gift of God, how can you say that if one desires to kill a man, that such a desire is good and therefore God sent? In answer to this, let me say that no man desires to kill another. What he does desire is to be freed from such a one. But because he does not believe that the desire to be free from such a one contains within itself the powers of freedom, he conditions that desire and sees the only way to express such freedom is to destroy the man, forgetting that the life wrapped within the desire has ways that he as a man knows not of. Its ways are past finding out. Thus man distorts the gifts of God through his lack of faith. You know, that's a really cool metaphor, because people often will ask a question that contains a very extreme example. Right?
Yes.
And I always think about, I'm trying to think of who it was. I want to say it was Marshall Rosenberg, but I could be wrong. But it was somebody that was teaching about helping addicts, and was saying that when someone is addicted to something, it's only because, you know, something that's bad for them. It's because this goes along with the idea of always assuming positive intent, right? Mm-hmm. It's because that thing, they get something from it. And if they knew a healthier way to get that same thing, they would choose a healthier way. And I think about this. It's like Neville is saying, no man really desires to kill somebody. They just want to be free from that person.
Mm-hmm.
And I think if you look at that as a very, in a less extreme example, you see this in a lot of relationships. Not that I coach people that want to kill one another, but when you're having a struggle in a relationship, it's not that you want to struggle. It's that you want something that you don't have and you don't know how to get it.
And it can even be just an encounter. I mean, I told you a story before the podcast that was tied to the TV story about this guy who reached out to me. I placed an ad because I was looking for some local help because I knew I would need that to do this. And this guy responded, and he was like the expert on everything regarding this kind of TV program, right? And everything he said was all the things that can go wrong when you do the program. And I obviously didn't want to buy into that because I understood that, start buying into that stuff, you're going to turn your thing on its ear and you're going to start doubting and wondering how things are going to work and all that kind of stuff. So I, just quickly and politely let him go and just said, thank you very much. He didn't like that too much, but, it's okay. The way I was looking at it, and this is my point, I was remembering that whenever I encounter something, in this case, a manifestation that didn't match my desire, just by encountering that, I could have gone spiraling out of control, but I didn't. Instead, I thought to myself, for all the negative things that guy's saying, he's doing the best he knows how to do.
Yes, yes.
I just appreciated what I could appreciate in the guy. Did I want to bring him on the team? No, and I didn't have to bring him onto the team, but I could still appreciate what he was trying to do. He was trying in his own twisted way to be helpful.
Well, he was just, he was just representing what he was seeing.
Yeah.
And also, there's potential that he was reflecting something in you.
Oh,
right?
I have no doubt about it. I could even tell that story, too.
So, that's the thing, is that everything is just always a reflection. And it's a real masterful way to deal with things like that, is to say, there's this, I'm looking in this mirror. Mm-hmm. And it's showing me that I have the potential to be focusing on some doubts and focusing on the hows and focusing on what could go wrong.
Yep.
And so I want to take that information because some of it's good information. Oh, That's interesting. I never thought about that. I need to take that into consideration, but I don't want to dwell there and I don't want to be in that energy of, right? I used to joke because, astrology wise, I'm a Taurus, which is an earth sign. Mm-hmm. And I used to live with a bunch of other people who were all fire signs. Mm-hmm. So what happens when you shovel a bunch of dirt on top of a fire?
Puts out the fire.
Right. So I used to joke because they would be the ones that come in and have this big idea and be all excited, fired up, right? Fired up about some big idea. And I would be the one that said, yeah, but what if this happens?
You throw the dirt
Have you thought about this? And as a parent, sometimes you have to do that, right? You have to realize they haven't thought this through and might not be a good idea to be fired up about. But I used to joke that I'm always the one that's throwing the dirt on the fire, right? It's like, don't go home and tell mom your idea because it's just going to, shut you down.
They'll just throw more dirt on it, too.
Okay, so let's see. Neville says, problems are the mountains spoken of that can be removed if one has but the faith of a grain of a mustard seed. Men approached their problem as did the old lady, who on attending service and hearing the priest say, if you had but a grain of mustard seed, faith as of a grain of mustard seed, you would say unto yonder mountain, be thou removed, and it shall be removed, and nothing is impossible to you. That night, as she said her prayers, she quoted this part of the scriptures and retired to bed in what she thought was faith. On arising in the morning, she rushed to the window and exclaimed, I knew that old mountain would still be there. For this is how man approaches his problem. He knows that they're still going to confront him. And because life is no respecter of persons and destroys nothing, it continues to keep alive that which he is conscious of being. That's such a great example, right? Because we've all been there.
Oh, yeah. It's almost a metaphor without a metaphor, because it's the mountain. You know, the metaphor is about the mountain, and she's trying to remove a mountain.
But, you know, it's kind of perfect to be in line with the story that we just told.
Yes.
Right? About someone saying, hey, look, these are the things that could go wrong.
Mm-hmm.
And what do? We say, okay, that's good to know. Thank you for telling me. I'll take that into consideration. Mm-hmm. And then we go back to visioning the way we want things to be.
Exactly.
And instead of rushing back to the window and saying, yep, that things are still there.
Yeah, I took note of everything the guy said. I didn't spend any time on it, but I said, yep, thought of that one. Yep, thought of that one. Yep, that's good. Yep, thought of that. Yep. You know, and then I was done.
Yeah, and that's what I'm pointing out here. Neville says things will disappear only as a man changes in consciousness.
Exactly.
And that's that switch that we make.
Mm-hmm.
Deny it if you will, it still remains a fact that consciousness is the only reality, and things but mirror that which you are in consciousness. You know, talking about people maybe giving us information and just being willing to see it as a reflection of something there in us,
mm-hmm.
then we can fix it. You know, it's like when I look into the mirror and I see, oh, my lipstick is smeared. You know, I don't smash the mirror. Right. I don't get angry at the mirror.
It's all the mirror's fault.
I don't say, that's stupid mirror. Give me another mirror.
Right.
I just fix the lipstick. And I don't take it personally. Right? It's just, oh, yeah, I see it now. And that's the way to deal with these kind of things.
Right.
Yeah. All right. So Neville says, so the heavenly state you are seeking will be found only in consciousness, for the kingdom of heaven is within you. As the will of heaven is ever done on earth, you are today living in the heaven that you have established within you. Ooh, that's like everything is a big reflection of what's going on in us.
We're talking serious mirror work here.
Serious mirror, right, like the kind of mirrors that are all the way around you.
Yep.
Hopefully not a funhouse mirror. For here on this very earth, your heaven reveals itself. The kingdom of heaven really is at hand. Now is the accepted time. So create a new heaven, enter into a new state of consciousness, and a new earth will appear. The former things shall pass away. They shall not be remembered, nor come into mind any more. For behold, I, and he says in parentheses, your consciousness, come quickly, and my reward is with me. I am nameless, but will take upon myself every name, he says, nature, that you call me. Remember, it is you, yourself, that I speak of as me. So every conception that you have of yourself, that is every deep conviction that you have of yourself, is that which you shall appear as being. For I am not fooled. God is not mocked. Now, let me instruct you in the art of fishing. It is recorded that the disciples fished all night and caught nothing. Then Jesus came upon the scene and he told them, cast their nets once more into the same waters that only a moment before were barren. And this time, their nets were bursting with the catch. This story is taking place in the world today, right within you, the reader, or for our case, the hearer.
Yes.
For you have within you all the elements necessary to go fishing. But until you find that Jesus Christ, your awareness, is Lord, you will fish as these disciples in the night of human darkness. That is, you will fish for things thinking things to be real, and will fish with the human bait, which is a struggle and an effort, trying to make contact with this one and that one, trying to coerce this being or the other being, and all such effort will be in vain. But when you discover your awareness of being to be Christ Jesus, you will let him direct your fishing, and you will fish in consciousness for the things that you desire. For your desire will be the fish that you will catch, because your consciousness is the only living reality you will fish in the deep waters of consciousness. If you would catch that which is beyond your present capacity, you must launch out into deeper waters. For within your present consciousness, such fish or desires cannot swim. To launch out into deeper waters, you leave behind you all that is now your present problem or limitation by taking your attention away from it. Turn your back completely upon every problem and limitation that you now possess. Dwell upon just being by saying, I am, I am, I am, to yourself. Continue to declare to yourself that you just are. Do not condition this declaration. Just continue to feel yourself to be, and without warning, you will find yourself slipping the anchor that tied you to the shallow of your problems and moving out into the deep. This is usually accompanied with the feeling of expansion. You will feel yourself expand as though you were actually growing. Don't be afraid, for courage is necessary. You are not going to die to anything by your former limitations, but they are going to die as you move away from them, for they live only in your consciousness. In this deep or expanded consciousness, you will find yourself to be a power that you had never dreamt before. The things desired before you, shoved off from the shores of limitation, are the fish you're going to catch in the deep. Because you've lost all consciousness of your problems and barriers, it is now the easiest thing in the world to feel yourself to be one with the things desired. Because I am, your consciousness, is the resurrection and the life, you must attach this resurrecting power that you are to the thing desired if you would make it appear and live in your world. Now you begin to assume the nature of the thing desired by feeling, I am wealthy, I am free, I am strong. When these feels are fixed within yourself, your formless being will take upon itself the forms of the things felt. You become crucified, that's in quotes, crucified upon the feelings of wealth, freedom, and strength. Remain buried in the stillness of these convictions. Then, as a thief in the night, and when you least expect it, these qualities will be resurrected in your world as living realities. So I want to stop there for a second and talk about this turn of phrase that he uses about that your formless being takes upon itself the forms of the things felt. And then he says, you become crucified upon the feelings of wealth, freedom, and strength. And what I hear there is actually that part of you that didn't believe, the part of you that keeps seeing the problems, the part of you that's unwilling to recognize your power is the thing that becomes crucified. In other words, because the other things become so real, even when it's just a feeling. It's that if you've ever known something beyond a shadow of a doubt, where there really wasn't evidence at all yet, and you just knew it, and then it happens, it's that feeling. It's that the feeling of success was so real that there wasn't any worry about it not happening. There was just no way it could go wrong.
When you describe all that, it reminds me of the story that I've told in the past, and you've also reiterated my story about how I started to do the mirror exercises.
Yeah.
And when I first started, my first day, I did my exercise for, I think, 10 seconds. It was not very long. I was not comfortable. I looked in the mirror and said, oh, God, do I really have to do this? I murmured a couple words. I said, okay, I'm done. And that was it. I just couldn't handle it. I'm contrasting that in my mind with the exercise that I did today, Because today, when I started my day, as I usually do, by doing my mirror exercise, I looked in the mirror and I threw my arms wide open. I threw this big smile on my face. I said, I love you. I think you're great. I was just like exuding all this positive, great feeling. And I hadn't really thought about the difference in body posture and body language and all that kind of thing. But when you were reading what you read here, I said, well, yeah, that's the thing that fell away was all of that stress that I was carrying about. Oh God, I really can't look myself in the eye and tell myself I love myself.
Yeah. And that's a huge shift.
It is. It's gigantic.
And it's also like a huge weight.
It is.
It's kind of funny. Neville, using the Bible a lot, most of us are familiar with the story of Job.
Mm-hmm.
And, the story of Job, everything that could go wrong did go wrong in this man's life. And the line from Job where Job says, the thing I feared the most has come to pass.
Yes, exactly.
And actually, in most of our lives, just like Job, when we look at Job and we see how many things happened to him, that's pretty rare for that many things to go wrong in someone's life. Literally everything that could go wrong went wrong. Yeah,
that's the opposite of what you talked about earlier when you talked about the team on the winning streak. This is the team on the losing streak.
Yeah, right? Right. And it's like, what I always think about when I think about that, the thing I feared the most has come to pass, is that the thing we fear the most rarely comes to pass.
Yeah.
And what most of the time, like as a relationship coach, dealing with people who, teaching people how to have what would be considered difficult conversations.
Mm-hmm.
And everybody knows, I often say that my husband says the 4 scariest words in the English language are, we need to talk. And, right? Nobody likes to, we need to talk. Oh, no. But.
Well, you hold your breath for a second. Oh, okay.
Right? But how many people, have I coached through conversations that come back to me and say, oh my gosh, it was so great. I was so worried about this conversation. It turned out it was a little awkward at first, but it turned out to be so good. And, everything worked out. And so it's that thing that sometimes people fear a difficult conversation for weeks, months, or years.
Mm-hmm.
For years, they don't have the conversation that could fix everything. Because why? Because they're fearing it. And yet it's always like not that bad.
Well, what's the acronym? FEAR, false evidence appearing real. I mean, that's what that acronym is all about.
Yeah, right. Exactly. Okay. So Neville says that when you least expect it, these qualities will rise up in your own world as reality. He says the world shall touch you and see that you are flesh and blood, for you shall begin to bear fruit of the nature of these qualities newly appropriated. This is the art of successful fishing for the manifestations of life. Successful realization of the thing desired is also told us in the story of Daniel in the lion's den. Here it's recorded that Daniel, while in the lion's den, turned his back upon the lions and looked towards the light coming from above, that the lions remained powerless and Daniel's faith in his God saved him. This is also your story, and you too must do as Daniel did. If you found yourself in a lion's den, you would have no other concern but lions. You would not be thinking of one thing in the world but your problem, which problem would be lions.
Mm-hmm.
Yet you're told that Daniel turned his back upon them and looked towards the light that was his God. If we would follow the example of Daniel, we would, while imprisoned within the den of poverty of sickness, take our attention away from our problems of debt or sickness and dwell upon the thing we seek. If we do not look back in consciousness to our problems, but continue in faith, believing ourselves to be that which we seek, we too will find our prison walls open and the thing sought, yes, whatsoever things, realized. Another story is told of the widow and the 3 drops of oil. The prophet asked the widow, what have you in your house? And she replied, 3 drops of oil. He then said to her, go borrow vessels. Close the door after you return into your house and begin to pour. And she poured from 3 drops of oil into all the borrowed vessels, filling them to capacity with oil remaining. You, the reader, you, the hearer, are this widow. You have not a husband to impregnate you or make you fruitful, for a widow is a barren state. Your awareness is now the Lord or the prophet that has become your husband. Follow the example of the widow, who instead of recognizing an emptiness or a nothingness, recognized the something, 3 drops of oil. Then he commanded to her, go within and close the door. That is, shut the door of the senses that tell you of the empty measures, the debts, the problems. When you have taken your attention away completely by shutting out the evidence of the senses, begin to feel the joy, symbolized by oil, of having received the thing desired. When the agreement is established within you so that all doubts and fears have passed away, then you too will fill all the empty measures of your life and will have abundance running over. I think it's important right here to recognize what we talked about before, and that's persistence. We've all had this experience of wanting something to happen and then having doubt come in. Neville's talking about go in and close the door. Close the door to all the senses. Close the door in the face of those doubts and those problems that keep nagging at you and, what really is, right? It's like, but that's the way it really is. Mm-hmm. He says, close the door to all of that and feel the joy that's symbolized by these 3 drops of oil. And I want to mention that 3 drops of oil is not very much.
Not really, no.
How many times have I chucked out the olive oil bottle because there was only a few drops in there? Can't even get it out of the bottle, right? It's not very much. He's saying it symbolizes joy. So the point I want to make is that you can do this. You can dig deep and find those 3 drops of joy and focus on them. And sometimes it feels wonderful, and then 5 minutes later that doubt creeps back in, and that debt is knocking at the door again, or the sickness or whatever it is that's got you in a tangle. And that's when you do this again. Mm-hmm. And you do it again. This is a process, folks. It's not like, I don't know anybody else, who every single time can go through this little process once and boom, it happens. Sometimes, yes.
I'm reminded of something that came up in a conversation on one of the recent shows, that every time that we put out a thought, an intention, something that we're trying to draw, to attract into our lives, regardless of whether we successfully open up enough to receive it, someone receives it. It doesn't go to waste. Somebody, if you aren't the one who is able to open yourself up enough to take it in, somebody else does. And the reason I'm reminded of that is it works both ways. If somebody else spins something up and they aren't able to receive it, it's available for you to take. It works both ways.
I had this conversation with someone yesterday that kind of parallels this, and that is the idea that there are ideas out there, like in the ether.
Yes.
And when they come to us and we don't create them or put them into, some kind of, start bringing them into reality, someone else will. And there's a wonderful book by Elizabeth Gilbert called Big Magic. And she talks about a story, she's a writer, and she talks about a novel that she was creating in her mind, ready to write it. And then some things happened in her life. She kind of put it on the back burner. And, months or years later, she still hasn't written it. And she meets another writer, and this other writer starts telling her about her project, and it's that novel. It's like, what? And she said that's when she realized that ideas are out there, and they will find someone that can be a channel for them, that can be a vessel for them to create it, right? And I thought that's really interesting, and it's kind of the same thing. It's like Everything is energy, so you're talking about something that's energetic, and when we put that out there, it will happen.
And not only will it happen, it will come to us in a way that here on the show we will talk about it in terms of something just came to me, as if we were given a message by inner being or spirit or something like that, which could certainly be. But the point is, it could also be an idea that another physical human spun up, and that's what just came to you. That's the way it feels when it comes in. It's just like, whoa, where did that come from?
I used to have a lot of ideas when I was raising my kids, and didn't have any resources to put those ideas to make them happen. I didn't have the money, didn't have the time, didn't have the energy, because I was busy. I was homeschooling, I was raising kids, I was doing all this other stuff. Mm-hmm. But I had quite a few ideas that I thought were good ideas, and then I saw them come to pass, by someone else. And one time, it's really funny because I was remodeling my house, and I decided I wanted my bathroom to look a certain way. And it was that I wanted black and white tile floors, and I wanted a pedestal sink, and I wanted all of the walls to be painted a mint green color. And I had it, and I did it. Mm-hmm. And the day that I got it finished, I got a magazine in the mail that was like one of these home decor magazines. And basically the bathroom on the cover of the magazine was my bathroom.
Was your bathroom?
Not really my bathroom, but it was exactly everything. And I thought, and that's when I started thinking, this was, 25 years ago. That's when I started thinking, oh, wow. Like that idea was out there. And mm-hmm. Someone else caught it too.
That's right. Yeah. We can all benefit from them. There's no lack. That's the thing. There's no lack of ideas, and there's no lack of energy out there. It just keeps growing and growing.
And that's what Neville says here, right? It says, then you too will fill all the empty measures of your life and have an abundance running over. Mm-hmm. So we wind up the whole book with these next paragraphs that are going to be very inspiring. Because Neville says, recognition is the power that conjures in the world. Every state that you have ever recognized, you have embodied. That which you are recognizing as true of yourself today is that which you are experiencing. So be as the widow and recognize joy, no matter how little the beginnings of recognition, and you will be generously rewarded. For the world is a magnified mirror. Ha! He said it. Magnifying everything that you are conscious of being. Oh my goodness, I'm so excited.
Well, it's appropriate. Of course, it had to be.
Meta, though. It's so meta because we're talking about ideas out there, and this is something I've written at length about and never recognized Neville saying it. And so, I am the Lord, the God, which has brought thee out of the land of Egypt, out of the house of bondage. Thou shalt have no other gods before me. What a glorious revelation. Your awareness now revealed as the Lord thy God. Come, awake from your dream of being imprisoned. Realize that the earth is yours, and the fullness thereof, the world and all that dwells therein. You have become so enmeshed in the belief that you are man, that you have forgotten the glorious being that you are. Now with your memory restored, decree the unseen to appear, and it shall appear, for all things are compelled to respond to the voice of God. Your awareness of being, the world is at your command.
How appropriate to end with that phrase, since that's the name of the book too. But yeah,
right?
Very
that's
cool.
That's so stuff. Great. I'm so excited. I never knew that Neville had this idea of the world being a magnifying mirror.
Yeah. Especially after we talked about the mirror and about mirror exercises and how all the different ways that the world mirrors things back.
We did not read this book in advance. We read it with you. Like our hearing of it was your hearing of it. Like for the first time, we just said, let's do this, and we did it live, and we're just read it. So
exactly. Yeah.
But I have found it to be so very true. And an interesting thing that he's talking about here, this sentence right here, recognition is the power that conjures in the world. And this past week, I've been journaling a lot, and that word has come up a lot because I've recognized certain things, and I use that word in a very powerful way. That when you recognize a certain quality, when you recognize a certain state of being, when you recognize a way that you are being, even if you're recognizing a way that you want to shift, when you can recognize that in yourself, then you'll start to realize it in your surroundings, in your opportunities, in your real life. But it has to be recognized. Like we all have this creative power. We all have personal power if we care to tap into it and to build it and to foster it. It's there. It's like those 3 drops of oil. You may not be utilizing it. You may not have grown it. You may not have caused it to shine, but you can find it. And we all have that, but it has to be recognized or else it's just dormant. It's just, not useful to us.
Well, that recognition is really just another way of saying, noticing when those ideas come to you, that idea that came out of nowhere. I mean, and I had a number of those with the TV project. We've all experienced this kind of phenomenon where something just comes to us. We weren't thinking about it, and we weren't consciously working through, okay, how do I go about solving this problem? We were just sitting there, and all of a sudden, boom, something flashed in our minds or in our hearts or whatever, and we say, "Whoa, that's a good idea. Where did that come from?"
Yeah, and I think you as a musician have to recognize, that's
it's a flash of inspiration
to musicians and artists and writers, right? When they get some kind of idea. I've often been shocked, where did that come from?
Right, exactly.
Where does it come from? When you write a poem, where does it come from? Especially when, like you said, you're kind of just in a thinking state, and all of a sudden it's like it came. We even have an expression where we say it came out of the blue, or it came out of nowhere.
Right. Yep.
It's like, oh my goodness, that thought just came out of nowhere. But no, it came out of you. And your consciousness is, Neville says, it's God.
That's actually a very key point, I think, because very often we'll say, well, that came out of the blue, all that kind of thing, as if to imply it wasn't me.
Right.
But it was you, even if you didn't consciously think the thought, it was still you because of the way the law of attraction works. The law of attraction is about like vibration, finding like vibration. When you're vibrating to this thing, that whatever it is that you're trying to attract, when you're truly vibrating to it, it just comes to you. It comes first as an idea, and then it turns into something physical.
I think what's so interesting is that as an artist and a songwriter, I know that feeling of where did that come from? And being so excited. Writing down the verses of a song or playing them on the piano or whatever, and feeling so excited about this is really good. Oh my goodness, where did it come from? But we look at other people, and what do we say? We say, oh, he's just a genius songwriter.
Yes.
Or she's an amazing artist, and we give them all the credit, but we have a hard time giving ourselves the credit. And I think part of that, part of that may be just not having confidence or self-esteem in ourselves. But part of it also is that when you've had that experience where it came so easy, it just seems unbelievable that it's we're used to struggling, right? Like Neville said, that's our MO is usually effort and struggle. So when something comes easy and it's wonderful, we're like, wow.
Yeah, but you're right. We got to take credit for those things. I mean, sure, it may have just come to us, but we did the one thing that Neville said we should do. We recognized it.
That's it.
That was the work.
That was it. That was it. That's the work, the recognition, and the responsibility. So when you look in the mirror, you fix the lipstick. You get the spinach out of your teeth. You do whatever the mirror is showing you instead of being angry with the mirror or deciding I'm going to get another mirror. People do this in relationships, right? Not saying you should ever stay in a relationship that's abusive. But sometimes people get in and out of relationships every other day. Right? Because it's not working and they just go next, because they refuse to look in the mirror.
Yeah.
And then take responsibility to fix what they could fix.
Not recognizing that it actually takes a whole lot more work to replace the mirror than it is to recognize what the mirror is telling you.
Yeah. Yeah. So it's not always easy. Nobody likes to look in a mirror and see something shocking.
I sure didn't want to the first time I did my mirror exercise. I shied away as quickly as possible.
I remember that, but you stayed the course and have had such wonderful results.
Oh, it has paid dividends galore, and I'm sure they've only just started. I think it's only going to get better from now on. So,
yeah.
Anyway, before we part for the day, I want to remind people, make sure if you have not downloaded the LOA Today app that you do so. And if you have downloaded it, especially if you've been enjoying it, make sure you share with others, tell other people about it. I'm so glad we have all of those little gifts in there, including the gift that Cindy gave us, the Lovely Magician's Guide to Soulmate Success, which we will be discussing. We're coming up with that next week. So that's going to be a lot of fun. But that's the whole point is it includes this stuff so that gives you stuff that you can tell people about when you're saying, hey, take a look at this app. This has got really cool stuff in it. And I'll tell you, Cindy, I'm looking forward to the day, and I don't know exactly when it's going to start happening, when we are actually including our program on television to a whole new audience and giving them the opportunity to get all these free gifts that are on the LOA Today app. I mean, it's going to be cool.
I'm looking forward to it too.
It's going to be fabulous. So thank you so much. Thank you, live streamers. Live streamers, Josie and Jeffrey were really sharing a lot of cool stuff. I couldn't really get into the conversation. I'll mention that Josie mentioned an interesting book called You Can Have What You Want If You Find It Within Yourself by Robert Russell. And so I'm going to include that one.
Oh, it's right what we were talking about. Awesome.
Yep.
Yeah.
So thank you for that. Thank you especially to our podcast listeners as well, because you've made this whole thing really work. You make it rock. You rock. Every one of you. Thank you so much. We'll see you all next time here on LOA Today. Goodbye, everybody.
Bye, everyone.